Last week, El Salvador, a country with a population of 6 million, became the first country to adopt Bitcoin as its legal tender. While this may be good news for the Bitcoin enthusiasts, they are very happy about it. I'm not really a Bitcoin enthusiast. I'm not enthusiast about anything else. I'm a pragmatist. If it works, if it's a good investment, I'm going to invest in it. I'm going to be happy about it. If it doesn't work, I'm not going to invest in it. This is how I do things, and so far I have been beating all these Bitcoin enthusiasts. And today, looking at El Salvador adopting Bitcoin as its legal tender is a very interesting subject to talk about. Even if you don't like Bitcoin, or maybe you like Bitcoin, it doesn't matter. What matters is that El Salvador is one of the few countries in the world that do not have a currency of their own. 20 years ago, El Salvador switched from the colon, which was their currency, to the US dollar. Their legal tender today is the US dollar, and they are moving now towards Bitcoin. So this is not the first time that El Salvador is adopting a foreign currency, we can say, as their legal tender. This is something that they did twice. And it's not a coincidence that the same country that adopted the US dollar 20 years ago, now today is adopting Bitcoin as its legal tender. There is a good reason why they are doing this, and we need to talk about this. Because this goes beyond El Salvador. Even to understand inflation, to understand how the economy works, how money itself works, I think it's very important to talk about this today. As we know, for this channel, the currency we use is not really Bitcoin. It's about watch time. It's about the number of likes. So I would really appreciate it if you smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm. If you are new to the channel, my name is Ishfaaq. I am an elite popular investor on eToro with over 2 million US dollars in assets under management. So please subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss the coming videos. Why does El Salvador, a country in Latin America and Central America, why do they use the US dollar as a currency? Most countries around the world have their own currency. Of course, there are some countries that share the same currency. For example, the Eurozone, Germany, France, they use the euro as a currency. And then we have some Central African countries that use the Central African franc as their currency, and they peg it to the euro. This is something interesting, but not for today. There are some countries now that uses the dollar as a currency. For example, recently, Zimbabwe adopted the dollar as a currency. It's because their own currency was going through so much inflation, hyperinflation, that it did not make sense for people to use that currency. So they just ditched it and started using the South African rand and the US dollar. And eventually the government said, okay, we will adopt the US dollar itself as legal tender. It's a better alternative to face the high inflation that was happening in the country. As far as El Salvador is concerned, they did not really have a period of high inflation that forced them to adopt the US dollar as a legal tender. From 1979 to 1992, El Salvador went through a civil war. We are not going to go into the details of why this civil war happened. It's not very important for today's video, but it happened. But of course, whenever we have civil war, people are going to flee. And most of these people that flee El Salvador, they went to the United States. And after the civil war ended, of course, it takes some time for the country to recover. It's not like after the Second World War ended in Europe, there was the Marshall Plan. All that money came from the United States, flew to Europe to reconstruct Europe. It's not like this at all. So El Salvador, they had some troubles to reconstruct their country, their economy after the civil war. How does the country reconstruct its economy? How does the country make money? There are two main ways to do that. If that country is highly industrialized, they are a capitalist country, what they can do is that they innovate, they produce things, they sell it to their own countrymen, countrywomen, and then these people are going to work and the economy is going to grow. It's like the United States of America. This is what happens in America. American companies, for example, Apple, they make the iPhone. They are going to sell it to the American public. The American public is going to work and buy the iPhone. The iPhone itself is an innovation. It's going to make them work better, make more money, and it's a cycle. This is how the economy grows. A capitalist economy grows. The second option is that if you are not really a capitalist economy, you are not really an industrialized nation. How do you grow your economy? Is through exports. So you produce goods, you sell it to other countries, and the other countries are going to give you money. This is what El Salvador tried to do, like any other poorer countries. Initially, this is what they tried to do, but now most countries are trying to industrialize and to become capitalist. For a country which is industrialized, it is possible for them to run a trade deficit. For example, the US, they have a trade deficit. It's not really a big deal. But a country that is relying on exports cannot really run a trade deficit. Their exports need to be higher than their imports. Otherwise, they're going to lose money every year. But El Salvador, being a small country with not so much farmland for them to farm anything and to export it, with no competitive advantage. For example, coffee, this was the main products, but other countries, Colombia, other countries in Latin America produce coffee, more coffee than them, so they don't really have a competitive advantage. They were losing money. They were running a trade deficit. So the government of El Salvador then had a very brilliant idea, we can say. If the country is taking so much time to recover from the civil war and they cannot really rely on export, what do? They have to industrialize. So how do we industrialize? We need people to invest in the country. And nobody really is going to invest in a country with a currency called the colon, which is very unstable. So they tried to switch to US dollars. And it's not really because the government wanted to switch to US dollars, it's because the people wanted to switch to US dollars. It's the same thing that happened in Zimbabwe. It's the people who decide the currency. The people of El Salvador, they were not happy about how the colon was, so they started using the US dollars. And another very important thing I mentioned is that during the Civil War and after the Civil War, many people left El Salvador to the United States. And these people now in the US, they send money back to their family. And this money that they send back, it's in US dollars. Of course, the family now in El Salvador, they have the option to choose between the colon and the US dollar. They're going to choose the US dollar because it's more stable than their colon. So they are going to keep it and not use their colon. Eventually, the government decided that this is what we are going to do. And the government knew that this remittance rate is one of the highest in the world. Today, it's at 24% of GDP. So 24% of the GDP of El Salvador just comes from money being sent from the United States to their families in El Salvador. And also the US is the main trading partner to El Salvador, both in terms of export and imports. So adopting the US dollar, at the time, it seemed like a good move. More people are going to send the US dollar, so there is no need for any transaction or anything. So people are sending US dollar, they can be used immediately. The US itself is a trading partner, the largest export and import trading partner to El Salvador. So it will be easy to just do trade with the US dollar, and eventually more US dollar is going to flow into the economy of El Salvador. So this was what was expected initially. Besides, with the US dollar being a more stable currency, this will bring more investment to El Salvador, and consequently, the country will industrialize and will grow. These were the expectations of the government adopting the US dollar as legal tender 20 years ago. But they made a mistake here. Currency doesn't mean anything. This is just a piece of paper. You want to use the US dollar as your currency, you want to use seashells as your currency, you want to use gold leaves as your currency, it doesn't matter. This is just a mean for transaction, a mean of exchange. For you to grow your economy, it doesn't really matter what your currency is. What matters is that you have real fundamentals for the economy to grow. And when we look at El Salvador, this is the country with the highest crime rate in the world. So investors would not want to invest in such a country. So they attempt to use the US dollar as a currency, as legal tender, didn't really work so well. Investors initially invested in the country, but when they see the high crime rate, they don't want to invest in that country anymore. Let's say you're investing in a country, you build a factory, you're happy that you don't have to face volatilities because of the US dollar being the home currency of that country, but then people come and break your factory, they put fire in your factory, you lose everything. And you don't really have a good insurance business in that country to protect you against all of that. So it's not really worth it to make an investment there. So the dollarization of El Salvador, it backfired. Another important thing to note is inflation. Inflation can be here whether the currency is strong or not. The currency doesn't really determine inflation. Of course, an increase in money supply will eventually lead to inflation, but inflation itself is an increase in prices. And there can be inflation even if the currency is very strong. It is possible. Of course, in El Salvador, they did not really have inflation there because using the US dollar as a currency halted their inflation. Their inflation rate actually was lower than in the US. But it did not really help the economy grow. The economy did not really grow. It doesn't matter if inflation is low, people are working harder and they are making less money. It's not good. It's better to have some, let's say inflation at 2%, but people are working harder, they are making more money. But this is what we saw in El Salvador. And compared to the US, where if things are going bad, there is the opportunity to print money to change interest rates. El Salvador cannot really do that. It's not just about printing money, it's about changing interest rates. So what they could do to raise inflation was to lower interest rates. But they could not do that because this is not their currency. And I don't think that the Federal Reserve System, that Jay Powell, when he's doing his meeting with his fellow governors, they are thinking about the economy of El Salvador. They don't have time to think about the economy of El Salvador. So the dollarization of El Salvador backfired in many ways. The population was not happy with the dollarization anymore. More than 60% of the population think that the dollarization was a bad thing for them. Now the government, of course, they have to change things. What do? They have a few alternatives. They can go back to the colon, but this is worse than the dollar because we know they had troubles before the dollar. Going back to the colon, it's going to be worse. Or better, they can use something which is better than the dollar. And lately, what has been better than the dollar? Maybe they can use gold, go back to the gold standard, but this is another issue. People need to sell them the gold. They need to buy the gold, and it's a little complicated to do that. Maybe they can use the Swiss franc, but there are not really so many. There are not so many Salvadorians living in Switzerland. They don't really have Switzerland as a trading partner. What they can do instead is use something which is completely new, which is easy to transfer, Bitcoin. So Salvadorians in the US, they can send money to their families in El Salvador using Bitcoin instead of the US dollar. That's why this move by El Salvador to make Bitcoin illegal tender, this is bad for companies such as Western Union because they don't have to go through Western Union anymore. They don't really have to go through the banks anymore. It's easier to send money through Bitcoin. So what El Salvador is doing today is the same thing they did 20 years ago. 20 years ago, they adopted the US dollar as a legal tender to make people want to invest in the country. Today they are doing the same thing because they are giving citizenship to anyone who buys free Bitcoin from them. Today the country has a center-right, quite populist and autocratic president. Of course, he would want to move away from the dollar because using another country's currency as your own is not really going to bring you national pride. Of course, he's a millennial, so he knows about Bitcoin. For him, it seems natural to move into Bitcoin. Bitcoin will lower transaction costs, but there is an issue, a fundamental issue with Bitcoin. Is it a currency or an asset? Because it cannot be both. We know that the US dollar is a currency. Nobody is really going to save the US dollar. Even in some countries, people are going to save money, but they know that over time it's going to lose its value because of inflation. The real use of US dollar is to be exchanged for goods and services. If El Salvador adopts Bitcoin as a legal tender, are people going to use Bitcoin to buy goods and services? If the price of Bitcoin keep increasing, it doesn't really make sense for you to buy goods and services with Bitcoin. You can just save it and expect it to rise in value. This is like an investment in Bitcoin. So you may say that this is a good thing for the people of El Salvador. They are richer, yes, on paper, not really on paper. Digitally, they are richer because of what's happening with the price of Bitcoin. Bitcoin goes to $1 million. They are very happy, they are very rich, but they are never going to use the Bitcoin. They are never going to use the Bitcoin to buy anything else. And making Bitcoin a legal tender and Bitcoin is appreciating so much, it means that it's going to cause hyperdeflation. I have never heard of hyperdeflation before, but I believe since deflation is worse than inflation, hyperdeflation is going to be very bad for the people of El Salvador. They cannot really grow their economy with the US dollar. Do you think they are going to grow their economy with something that is appreciating much faster than the US dollar? I don't think so. So it's bad for the people of El Salvador. Maybe they're going to be rich on paper, yes. So the best solution for them, they get rich through Bitcoin, they sell the Bitcoin, they take US dollars, and they run away from the country. They go to the US, they go to somewhere else, just leave the country behind. But if most people in the country does that, the economy is not really going to grow. So El Salvador, they are not really going to be financially independent what they are selling, what the president is selling, that they are moving away from the US dollar to be financially independent, but that's not happening. They are dependent now on those big whales on Bitcoin who are going to buy and sell Bitcoin. Those big hedge funds who buy and sell Bitcoin. In some way, they move their dependence on the US dollar, on the Federal Reserve System, which is not really that bad to be dependent on because it's stable, into something unstable. Because Bitcoin is unstable, it can go to 1 million, it can also go to zero. And what happens if it goes to zero? Then this is also bad for the people of El Salvador. Because they gave up the US dollar for Bitcoin, and now this Bitcoin is losing its value. So they are losing all their investments, and they didn't really want to invest. They just wanted something to exchange. So using Bitcoin as a legal tender today for any country is a very bad idea. But using Bitcoin for a country which doesn't have power on its own money is the worst idea possible. Because you don't know where Bitcoin will go. It's so volatile today. So you're using it as a currency, you're buying coffee. You will see on Twitter, people are saying they are living in El Salvador, they are buying coffee with Bitcoin. They show how they are buying a cup of coffee every day. These are rich people. It's going to work for the rich people, of course. But the poor people of El Salvador adopting Bitcoin as currency, this is bad for them. This is not good at all. So to conclude, it doesn't matter what money is. It can be seashells, it can be cigarettes, it can be gold leaves, it can be gold bars, it can be Bitcoin, it can be the US dollar, it can be your dog's poop, it doesn't matter. What matters is that the fundamentals of the economy are here to produce that money, to create that money, because money can be created. Money is just a form of capital, just like labor is, enterprise is, and we need all these forms of capitals for the economy to work. The economy grows, they create money through the banking system, and people get richer, they reinvest that money, they save that money, they are going to spend that money, and eventually they get even richer. This is how an economy grows. You don't just switch currency because it's not working anymore. And it's not because you adopt a better currency, a foreign currency as your own, and because that currency is increasing its value, that it's going to work over the long term. In today's video, I'm not really an expert on El Salvador politics, economics to really know what is the best solution for them. Maybe the best solution for them is to remain with the US dollar and in some way to adopt their own home currency as another legal tender so that they can eventually make the switch. So they use a hybrid in some way. But to make the hybrid with Bitcoin, I don't think this is a good idea. So let me know in the comments what do you think about El Salvador adopting Bitcoin as legal tender. Thank you for watching this video. Please like, subscribe and share. Please watch these two videos if you have missed them. Have a nice day and goodbye.